Welcome, friends and enemies, to the Forensic Focus podcast. We have joining us today Sophie Powell. I spoke with Sophie recently, along with Rob Black and Sarah Morris, about Cyber 912. But Sophie is coming back to join us again. We've got a heads up that you recently spoke on a TryHackMe Kickstart Your Career webinar, so we're going to be cross-examining you about that later, which you're totally unprepared for, which will be funny.
Si, that's actually next.
That's after this?
Yeah, I literally come out of this podcast straight into the next.
When does that start?
It starts at 5 o'clock in American time, so 10 o'clock in our time.
Oh, 10 o'clock in our time. Well, so do you want to do a run through of what you're going to tell them, and then we'll try and pit them to the post?
Yeah, I can tell you all that I'm going to tell them anyway.
Excellent stuff. Cool. And poor Desi is up at the crack of dawn there, 6:07, judging by the clock on his back. Mm-hmm. And he hasn't even had a cup of coffee yet, so this will be good.
Yeah.
So there we go. So, fantastic. I think, we didn't get to do a podcast towards the end of the last year, Desi. You and I wanted to do a Christmas special, and then for various assorted reasons, like you being in the UK.
I was going to say laziness is probably the more accurate one of us not doing it.
I'd like to think that it was more scheduling things on our part, but actually you might be right. It might be lazy.
I honestly think that because we do a lot of podcasts where we finish, we say goodbye to the guest, and then we sit on this for like another hour anyway, and we should just record it because we could pull single episodes out of all of that, but we just sit around and talk shit.
Yeah, you could have a bloopers part.
Yeah. Oh, that's the actual podcast. Yeah, we don't need a separate one for that. Like, Si and I make a lot of bloopers during the podcast itself.
Yes, yeah.
I've seen a couple. I think I did a couple myself last time as well.
It's quite fun. I was going to say, this is going. If you're a regular listener, please be aware there may be very little forensic content in this podcast. But yeah, we both have lives, we both have jobs, we both have ideas, and we chat about these non-stop. I mean, Desi has his own podcast as well, and we'll pick it up here for a second. And the Hardly Adequate podcast is absolutely brilliant and well worth a listen to. And recently, his YouTube channel on sweaty cyber advice has taken off.
Yeah, that's been. I've been pretty happy with how that's been going so far. So. It's all YouTube shorts, so it's all less than a minute content, but it's all just kind of like general advice for career or cyber or like random thoughts that pop into my head while I'm in the gym, which is usually a lot of weird stuff, and I have to edit a lot of it.
Yeah, no, that's totally understandable. I mean, to be fair, when you're busy trying not to drop something on your head or on your foot, the thoughts that are going through your head are generally more personal safety than reasonable cyber.
Or just as people do, because I just saw your video that you posted up on my Discord. Deadlifting a car apparently is what you need to think about rather than giving out advice.
Yeah, that was today's gym session. We got. So we run a strongman competition every year in the town I live in, and this year we've decided to push the boat out a little. So we have some very interesting equipment turning up, and one of these pieces of equipment is a car deadlift frame. It arrived yesterday, and I went to the gym today with my PT, and it was like, right, okay, so we don't know how this works. Do you want to try lifting a car? I was like, okay, why not? Let's do that for a starting point today. So yeah, I've lifted the car today.
The interesting thing? What kind of car were you deadlifting? Oh, you did it. I just watched your video. You managed to do it. 2 reps.
I've got to see this video. I was going to say this could be a brilliant next X post of you moving the cars out the way to the Cyber 912 BT tower.
Well, hang on. So let's.
I thought this was going to be 1 rep, but you people are giving you shit. I can see that. Oh, you went for pride. So what is the weight end up being? Like, can you calculate it? Like, does it give you?
I did some maths on this, and actually it's not that heavy. I think it's somewhere, and it's hard to tell because the curb weight of that car, which is a Seat Ibiza, is about 1.1 tons, so 1,100 odd kilos. When the frame is the frame is 60 kilos, but the weight is over the engine. A lot of the weight is in the engine, so that sits above the front wheels, of which you're pivoting over. So that's you're not lifting 1,100 kilos by any stretch of the imagination. I did some sort of A-level mathematics on it, and I reckon it's somewhere between 170 and 200 kilos to lift.
Okay, so like a standard,
it's not
a standard
insignificant,
deadlift.
but it's a standard deadlift. Yeah.
Okay.
Emphasis on not insignificant. I was proud of my 70 until I came here. I couldn't even get up the frame.
I would still be proud of that. This is a plug. Anyone that wants to join my Discord server, come along, because I have a fitness channel, and this is where all size stuff goes. So feel free to come along.
I've got to join this Discord server. I've been missing out.
Jump onto.
Yeah, we'll make sure you get the links.
Yeah, hardlyadequate.com and find the invite link there. But yeah, we'll post it in the show notes.
I think the best ideas come to you in the gym, though. Like, I was watching the Forensic Focus podcast in there last night on the treadmill, getting ready for today, thinking like, let me get ready here, and like thinking about what I had to say. So I think the gym's a good place to think and do that type of thing.
I'll be honest. The reason I started going to the reason I started going to the gym was because I was horrifically unfit and it wasn't good for me. But I find it. So I do two things, and I know that we sort of touched on mental health aspects of things, and especially in the digital forensics side of stuff. Where we deal with some things that are occasionally incredibly unpleasant, which is, it's known. It is what it is. Occasionally, it does good to be able to practice something. It's referred to as mindfulness often, whereby you are focusing and concentrating on something else. Now, I do two things. One is I'm a photographer. I take photographs, and the idea of attempting to get a composition is all encompassing. You're trying to get a shot. You're trying to get the camera settings to work. You're trying to line it up, frame it properly, capture the moment, and all of this. So it's a very mindful exercise that helps you to maintain your mental health. The other one is I go to the gym and I lift heavy things because there's very little else you can think about while you're busy trying to lift a car. You can only really think about trying to lift a car. Yeah, so whatever else you've dealt with in the day is something that you can put aside. And I personally find it a hugely helpful sort of mental health tool to maintain it. And the other thing is we work in an industry which is very sedentary. We sit at a desk all day. We sit still. Yeah. So getting out and moving. Yeah. You will never catch me on the treadmill listening to any podcast, so
I started on the gym again recently just because I've moved, and it makes a difference, especially when you're remote working. Because I feel like the only reason I got on the treadmill is I just sprint because I have so much pent up energy. I need to just get out, and then you sit there and it's suddenly empty, and there's nothing to think, nothing to do because you can't breathe. So you try to breathe first, and then you can get your thoughts back after, and it's quite nice in a way. But good for mindfulness.
Exactly that.
Do we want to talk about career stuff now? That's kind of like what I think that was the main. Yeah, I think that's the main point. So let's do that, and then I'm sure we'll tangent into something else again afterwards. Yeah. But maybe Sophie, if you want to give us all the good information from the TryHackMe webinar, so that we can steal all their audience.
Of course. So I've TryHackMe, we've been chatting to you for a while, so they were brilliant in they've given us lots of prizes for different events for Cyberwomen groups, and getting to know them, they invited me onto the panel, which is about kickstarting your career. So I know a lot about that, considering I've basically just done it. So I did myself have quite a interesting road in. I struggled with the normal graduate scheme roles based on the fact that I found myself getting knocked out in pretty much every single gamified assessment that there was, because I couldn't quite get the right kind of balance between the how much risk you should take and what little risk you should take versus what the company were looking for. It just wasn't adding up for me. And then the interviews.
Let me just interrupt briefly and say this lady has a first degree in cyber security from one of the Russell Group universities in the UK. So the equivalent of the Ivy League in the US is our Russell Group. So it's not like she's short of some things going on up top. It is, and I think you and I have talked about this previously, about the fact that gamified assessments are not necessarily a good way of finding staff.
I could talk for days about why gamified assessments are just a generally bad idea. It's a very nice, easy way for them to file out applicants, yes, but there's never a right answer. And I mean, one of them, I was sat there for a minute, how many times can you hit a space bar? And I was like, well, now I've just got to hurt a finger.
That was a question.
How many times can you hit a space bar in a minute? And you physically had to sit there and just hammer your space bar for a minute, and then you got a score.
I'm feeling that it wouldn't be wrong to call out this employer as.
It's most of them.
Well, it's probably but it's probably so. This is the problem, right? Like this, when you say gamified, because I've seen some, and I honestly think some gamified's really good if you're going for a technical role. So, and it's not like this is another thing within the industry. I think is that cybersecurity, while there are entry-level jobs and you can teach people things, and like I've spoken about it on my podcast, is that in general it's kind of not cybersecurity because there's so much free information out there to get yourself a leg up over the competition within the industry. So gamified can be really good if it's practical for whatever job you're going for. If it's just like a general job, but these the companies themselves are just paying a third party to create these training systems, and those companies have no cyber people in them and have no they're just like, oh, we're just going to create games based on computers by the sounds of it. That's the first time I've heard that kind of question in a survey.
Yeah, so I'll give you a little bit of an overview. So basically the reason that I had an issue with them is you did your application, you did your CV, you did your cover letter, and then you immediately got put through to this gamified assessment where some people started getting filed out. But it wasn't gamified assessments where you're doing stuff related to cyber. So I think one of them was you had a pound, and then you had to either press the up arrow or the down arrow, and it would go up or down. And then if you press a down arrow and you got an extra pound, and are you going to press it again, or are you going to take the risk and go up to see if your decision's going to change?
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's so dumb.
So it's stuff like that where I'm like, actually, all you're seeing here is a panicked student from another end, not really knowing what you're looking for, other than, do I take the risk of pressing down, or do I just press up and get on with it? And I'd sit there and I'm like, okay, fair enough if they were cyber related, if you were giving me cyber questions to do, or even like a piece of code to write that could be tested against some AI generated thing that could then file us out on something that is remotely skill based.
Do you know who the not the companies that you're applying for, but do you know the company that was running these? Because that's it just sounds ridiculous.
It is. Off the top of my head, I can't remember the company itself because you just click on them and you go through. But it's not uncommon practice to see that in graduate schemes anymore. A lot of them that we saw, you either went straight to the video interviews or you go straight to the gamified assessments, depending on how many applicants they had. So
I'd be interested for anyone.
Do you get Black Mirror? Do you get Black Mirror in Australia? Because this
yeah. That's what it sounds like. I was going to say, and I'll reach out to my network. But if anyone's listening from Australia, let us know if in the comments or send me an email or something if you've seen this anywhere else, because this is very interesting. I don't see this in Australia because I know a lot of people that interview for graduate roles, and some of them do have gamified learning, but it's very targeted. It's not no one seems to be using even Big Four companies, which kind of just use whatever. I haven't seen that in Australia.
Yeah, I would never have an issue if it was like based around cyber, if we were doing something that used skills I would need in that job to pull out, if it's gamified or not. But it's more, they're clearly testing how risky a person you are, your reaction times, and bits like that, which it seems a little out of place for a graduate scheme in cyber, especially when we've got all of these technologies that really could test us on other things.
It sounds a lot like the sort of snake oil salesman of some testing company turning up and going, I can deliver you a candidate who will work harder to press a button, who will be less risk averse when making a decision. I mean, first of all, it's a load of bollocks, you know.
Yeah.
There's nothing that you can judge by how fast you can press a space bar, except perhaps whether you spend a lot of time on video games or not. I mean, it's hardly a character judgment or anything of the sort.
Although, if they're not doing this in Australia, there's a gap in the market, and welcome to the highly adequate gamified interview testing done by me. Each company can pay $50,000 to have access to my platform, and that'll be my new job.
And we will tell them how fast they're pressing spacebars. Yeah, that's excellent. Yep. Sounds like a plan.
Sorry. No, it's okay. It was just one of those things that I did not see coming when I started applying for jobs.
That's nuts.
Because we saw gamified assessment section, and we were like, oh, this would be fun. Like, gamified assessment, I don't have to do an interview. And then you get hit with that, and it's all fun and games because you're not really using your brain. You're reacting based on what is initiative to you, what comes first. And then you sit there and you think, how am I being judged on that? Like, have I been too risky? Have I been too nice? But it's a whole other ballpark, really. And then you get your video interviews, which, they're intense as well.
I'm going to say Q the next level of this. It will be Squid Games for interviews. You know, it'll be, how willing are you to push somebody off a cliff in order to get the job?
Yeah. I mean, I don't think the interview side of things, the recorded videos, I think are the closest things we're ever going to get to interviews where you're doing it online and you can't physically have someone talk to you. So again, didn't see it coming though, because when we went to the graduate scheme, we just assumed we'd all be called for interviews and Teams calls. Like, we never even considered the fact that it might be a video recorded self-assessment, which was another...
Yeah. So I've definitely done those before, and they're the worst. It's so off-putting, talking to the camera.
Yes, those ones.
I've heard a rumor that those aren't being judged by human beings anymore. They're being fed into a machine learning algorithm that sees, looks for your keywords and looks for other aspects of it, which we all know how good machine learning is. So, that's obviously another great way to hire staff. I'm going to say, I have the advantage of being infinitely older than both of you. And therefore, I have never seen any of this. It
is... Go for a grad role, Si. Go and apply and see how you do.
I'm going to say, I'm not qualified. I don't have a cyber degree. I will never get in.
Yeah.
They discard me in the first cut.
That's the funny thing as well, like, when you think about it, like, a good litmus test is if you put someone who is in the industry already through one of these tests, will they get through and get a graduate role as with the skill set that they have now? I think if companies answer that question and it's no, then it's a bad test. Like,
yeah, absolutely. I remember one interview I did. Well, it wasn't an interview. I didn't even get to the interview stage, and I was talking to a recruitment agent. And this is a fair few years ago, and he was like, "Do you have an MCSE, so a Microsoft Certified Systems Engineer qualification?" I was like, "No, I wrote the course material for it, but I don't have one of those qualifications because you can't have the job." I was like, "Well, hang on, what exactly are you looking for here?"
Yeah.
So yeah, it is truly an insane way of trying to hire people.
Yeah,
it is.
But we interrupted.
I do. No, sorry. I do sit here and then I'm like, am I being a bit hypocritical? Because if I was a big company and I put out a grad role, and you can get thousands of grads applying to this, how would you go about starting to bring them down without using excessive manpower and checking everything on CVs, because it's not unrealistic to expect people maybe will.
I would say, like, and this is based on my conversations with other people as well, but have like key qualifications really low because it's a grad role, so you don't have many like requirements to come in. If you want the degree, sure, like that's must have degree, whatever. And then preferred qualifications, like if you're getting thousands, just have like a list of easy preferred qualifications that could be like know a programming language, like the basics of, or like if you, I'm purely thinking technical role here, but have like a few things that are free that people can go and do, and then that way, because that's what I'm saying with it's not quite entry level. Like if people really want jobs, they'll do like a little bit of their own research, and then at least that kind of like thins the herd a little bit because it shows motivation for people really wanting the job. But then like realistically after that, like I've got friends who they dread it, but they look through hundreds of applications, and it's kind of the only way to do it well is have a human eyeball those applications and then pick out the ones that they want to interview.
There was a colleague that I worked with at Warwick who filtered the applications for the degrees, because it's the same actual sort of levels of things. You get hundreds of applications for a handful of places on a degree course. And Peter, who Sophie is very fond of, Peter had a very, very basic fundamental thing, was that you must deliver your application in this format of this many bytes. It was this many bytes long, this format, and it had to have this title for the document title.
Yeah.
And if you mess that up, you were binned immediately. And actually, it just showed it
attention to
the
detail.
Crowd by about 50% just on attention to detail. And that's, I mean, that is actually just a fundamental thing. If you're applying to every grad scheme, you're not going to be doing this kind of thing. If you really want to work for a company, you're going to put in the effort to look at these little details. And the other thing is that if you're actually putting stuff in, and I'm sure that you sent your CV over, which was probably one of the things, but you probably also filled out a 50-page form online that will ask you a whole bunch of other specific questions about yourself. And you're right, you can weight it. It's like, yeah, okay, so yes, you know, do you have a degree? Yes, no. Do you have experience of Python and or C and or assembly language or whatever? And then you can say, okay, have you entered any competitions while you were at university? What are your other hobbies? And you can start to weight these things that, you know, if you happen to have a life outside of university and you know, compete or do things in the cyber society, or you know, start a cyber women group or something like that, you should get extra points for, you know, passion for your industry. And that's not hard to do in an automated way. It's something that you can easily program something to look at and start to assign points on, and then you cull the bottom third again and start looking. But you know, to start that culling on the basis of how many times you can press a space bar, it's ridiculous.
Yeah, tell me about it. So the problem is that you have grads who are just fighting for a space at this point. It goes from being well enough to think, oh, I'd like to work in this specific area, in this specific role, to very quickly realizing you have to go for every single role that is being advertised to even get a chance of possibly getting an interview at one, because you're getting filed out so quickly and there's so much competition. So I do feel for grads, and I got so lucky with how I ended up with mine. And I know people that went through the schemes, and some of them went for one and they got it straight away and they were just a perfect fit. Everything worked in their favour. And I know people who have been applying for over a year and a half on graduate schemes and they have still got nowhere. So it's really difficult. It's a really, really difficult experience.
Now, I mean, a loaded question that, you know, is not necessarily one to answer for you, but graduate schemes are fine and they're cool, but are people actually applying for jobs not jobs as well? Not a graduate scheme isn't a job, it's a job, but I mean just like ordinary advertised jobs, or are they only looking for graduate schemes?
I think generally, because of this, there's a whole thing going around at the minute with the entry levels being 2 to 3 years. So a lot of the junior roles now that people are advertising, so junior or maybe entry level, what people are calling, are asking for 2 to 3 years experience, which is difficult to meet because they're going to file you out as soon as you see that you've not even graduated from university yet if you're applying in January, because you won't have the experience. I mean, some people did, so some people may have taken the gap year before university and done that, so they would be absolutely fine. But the people who have done college or sixth form, university, and then going straight out to a job are immediately probably not going to be considered. So where do you spend your time, if that makes sense? So I would naturally, I just spent my time on the graduate roles where I didn't need the experience beforehand to be considered. But that's my personal experience. Other people would have done other things.
In the UK, are the graduate roles that you're seeing at the moment, are they requiring a specific cybersecurity degree? And like, where are the graduate roles? Like, what kind of companies are they going into? Are they kind of like the big four, like big consulting? Like, where is there smaller companies that are doing graduate, or is it mainly those ones?
So generally, the pattern that I saw, and again, this is very subject to opinion, is you have the big four and the corporates and the big ones that you automatically will go for and just put your name in to see how far you get. And then you have the smaller companies that do them, but you do have to dig a bit harder for them to find them. So where I've ended up, Cyberfort, they're not the biggest company in the world. We're only about 130 people, but they happen to be starting their graduate scheme on the year I was going through. And their recruiter reached out to me to ask a couple of questions. We got talking from there. So I didn't actively go out and find that one. That one found me, which I'm very lucky to have. So yeah, I think graduate schemes are becoming more popular because people are starting to realize the benefits of having a graduate jump around your company, do the bits and pieces that pick up on the things that maybe they aren't doing or could be doing better, start to bring in newer, fresher ideas and kind of creative out the box things that maybe they hadn't considered before. And it's definitely becoming more popular, I think, but it's still got a little while to go in terms of, yeah.
And sorry, I missed that. So are they requiring degrees, like specific cybersecurity degrees? Okay. So they're still not requiring a degree to apply?
STEM degrees, they like. So obviously apprenticeships come into play here as well. But you've got to have something.
I was going to say, on the apprenticeship front, my son told me just before this recording, actually, he pointed out that it's actually National Apprenticeship Week this week in the UK.
It is.
He has an apprenticeship. He finishes it this year and will come out as a chartered town planner. He's got a degree, master's degree in the chartered town planner qualification out of South Bank University in London. Well working, well not building up any debt, well doing very well for himself and having a job and like that. And the idea, I'm a big fan of apprenticeships because certainly the ones that I've been involved in, and I worked for delivering an apprenticeship into one of the government agencies in the UK. He says very carefully, choosing his words. You're choosing people and then bringing them up to what you want them to be in your business, effectively.
Yeah, exactly that.
And that's a fantastic way to go because you're getting a lovely, fresh, blank, enthusiastic canvas who isn't building up thousands of pounds of university debt, which is actually a really big issue in the UK. I don't know what it's like in Australia, Desi. How is education funded there? If you're doing a degree, are you building up huge amounts of student debt, or is it a bit better funded?
You do, and it was essentially interest free, other than you paid like an index every year. But now with the rise of like it's tied to the rates, I think. So I never researched it because I managed to pay mine off before the kind of like economy went to shit again.
Yeah.
But then the other side of it is the government changed the contributions. So you accrue what it's called is HECS, so HECS, which is Higher Education Compensation Scheme. I forget what the C stands for. but you accrue hex based per subject, and it depends on where it sits within, like whether it's STEM, arts, whatever. So before, it used to just be pretty standard across the board. You would pay more if the course needed more resources. So if you were doing like a practical subject that like consumed stuff, your course would cost you more. But if you did a course that didn't, so like philosophy, it would be slightly cheaper. But then the government tried to change the whole scheme to make it so that it was trying to fill shortages in job roles. So obviously, like education, engineering got discounts, whereas arts got more expensive. Which personally, like, I don't think was a good idea because, like, I don't know, the government seeing the balance sheet that way, but it didn't change anyone's preference because they just accrued more hex debt because it wasn't seen as a loan, it was seen as this debt. But then, like, realistically, like, earning potential for an engineer versus an art student on average is much higher for the engineer. So they realistically, if they wanted more money, people were still going to do engineering. They should have just put up the cost of engineering. And I'm saying that as doing an engineering degree. So, like, I don't know. Like, that was kind of shitty. But that's where it is currently, I think.
I was crying the other day because there was an article pushed out in the UK about the least valuable degrees to have because the earning potential was so poor. And absolute confession time, I have a photography degree. I got it during lockdown, I got it during COVID. But apparently that's the worst degree that you can have in terms of earning potential.
Yeah.
So I was slightly miffed at that. But anyway.
I logged into my student finance account the other day and I will never ever be logging in ever again until that number is back down to 0. Oh my gosh. The way that accrues and you don't even see it.
Yeah.
Never again.
Yeah, it's depressing. Yeah, I was so happy when I paid mine off. I was like, especially because like it's government controlled. So they, like, it's the same as, like, I don't know whether you guys have the similar thing over there, but like super, essentially, like, it's your forced retirement fund. It's like a 401k in the US equivalent.
Yeah, we kind of do it. It's called national insurance, and it's basically worse shit.
Yeah, it's the same over here. But again, it's like money that you're putting away that, like, is yours, but the government essentially controls it. And what they've done recently is they keep upping the retirement age, so it's like keeps pushing it later for when you can access those funds. Yeah, it's like anything that's government controlled, I'm like, if it's a debt, I want to pay it off quickly, because if they change the rules and make it interest based, like, then you're kind of screwed.
Yeah, I'm going to say this: if there's one thing we can give the young people starting in the career to take away from this podcast, it's start your pension as soon as you can, because compound interest is definitely on your side. And the British government will do bugger all for you in terms of your retirement, so make the most of whatever your company is offering you.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's
not that we're financial.
There we go.
Not that we're financial advisors, and definitely seek your own advice, but in general, anything with compound interest is a pretty good idea. Yeah.
Absolutely.
So back to employment again.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, you are now gainfully employed. But as a graduate, how are you finding the graduate scheme?
So I really actually enjoy it. When I started, I finished the cybersecurity degree, and I kind of sat there and I was like, I still don't quite know what I want here. So I remember talking to you, Si, about some of the applications that I went through and like wording and bits like that. I'm sure you read a few of my cover letters before they went off. And I was writing the cover letters still thinking, I'm still not sure if I want to go here and like spend my time in this one specific role in cybersecurity. So the benefit of mine is the rotational side. So I rotate around 4 different departments. So I get to see red team, blue team, consulting, and GRC, which is where I am now, which is absolutely excellent because it's meaning I'm getting little bits of experience where I am, and it's seeing where my skill set's best. So I think if you guys haven't already guessed, quite good at talking, quite like talking, probably talk to a brick wall if someone put me up to it. Client facing will probably be something that will benefit me well. So it's kind of finding that side and where I'll sit, and if I go out to companies and go and help them and have a bit more of a standardized role and kind of do something within a company itself. It's kind of that. So I'm really enjoying it. It's good fun. It's good fun so far.
So have you done a full set of rotation yet, or are you still waiting
so
one or two?
I've done red team. So I went into the pen testing team and they were lovely. Pen testing and technical, while you do CTFs, pen testing a company is a completely different story, because you can't do all the stuff you do when so naturally within red teaming, what I found when I did CTFs is you have to try and hide yourself on the network, which you absolutely cannot do there. So that was a bit of a shock to the system of watching people and going, oh, can't do that here. So that was actually quite probably good practical experience. And then I'm currently just finishing my rotation in GRC. So auditing and chasing people around France's and all of that jazz type thing.
How have you found GRC? I reckon you will have enjoyed it, but I might be wrong.
So I enjoyed it to there is an extent to which I think. So I did the internal GRC. So it meant I got to meet a lot of different people in the company, which I really enjoyed. So again, chatting to people, kind of understanding a bigger oversight of how the company runs, which was really good. Generally, I think there's a lot of decisions to be made by quite a lot of people. And I like to do things quite quickly. If I set my mind to something, there isn't much you can do to stop me from going and doing it pretty much immediately, or I'll start to move on to the next thing and forget about that and forget to come back and it's all a mess. So when there's lots of processes it has to take, that's where I think I started to struggle, because I was like, I just want to get this done now. But then you can't, because you've got to wait and go through the motions and go through the process. And it would have to be something I would have to get used to a lot quicker if I was going to do a career in GRC.
Fair enough. I can see that. On reflection, I can definitely see that, yeah. Okay, so what's up next, you know? Is it consultancy or is it blue?
Yeah, I'm heading into consultancy next. So I'm excited for that one, because that'll be external facing clients. So yeah, that'll be good. I've never explored that one before. So it'll be interesting to see where I end up there.
So the last time we spoke, I mean, not the last time we spoke, but the last time we spoke on the podcast, we were talking about Cyber 912 and the competition. Is it relevant to what you're doing?
So Cyber 912, generally, yes, because I think if you want an incident response career, an absolutely excellent route to look down with Cyber 912, because all of these policies and these things you have to be aware of naturally will play into what you do. So where I am at the minute, it's probably not a fair representation, because I'm not responding to anything happening. I'm bringing change around, but it's change that we want to make, instead of change that's been forced upon us by the scenarios that Cyber 912 team put together. So I think, yes, definitely. It gives you a good wide understanding of cyber and the people to involve. So that's a big thing as well. The people, to like, which departments are you pulling in? Who do you need to kind of advise? Who do you need to speak to? Who do you need to action? But I will update you on that when I've finished the rotation and see what I feel then, because I've still got 2 to go. One of them is blue teaming. So yeah.
Yeah, no, that's fair.
Competition's coming up quickly now.
Yeah, week after next. We will have a conversation offline about where the hell we're sleeping. Yeah. So yeah, no. Again, you know, we talked about it. It's been a very, actually, when this goes out, the competition will probably be done, so I can talk about the scenario. So, Desi, you'd probably quite like this one. So it's a mixed scenario that's been put down in front of us. We have both
and I'm just going to say, to the Cyber 912 team, this is completely fictional. Nothing is true. Nothing that's reported anywhere is true.
you say that. You say that, but it's terrifyingly plausible, and I think that's where this competition actually has been, for me, something that I find relevant, because the scenario is this, that there is a vulnerability in SCADA systems, which we know exist, Stuxnet being a prime example of vulnerabilities in SCADA systems, that is being exploited in water distribution network, or in water networks. It doesn't necessarily say distribution, but water processing plants and water distribution and waste distribution networks. Simultaneously, there is a general election going on in the UK, which will happen later this year. Please, God, let it happen later this year. We need to get rid of the current idiots. You can fight me over this one. Whether you're Tory or Labour or whatever, I don't care. The current government are idiots. It doesn't matter. The rest of it is irrelevant. But there's an election going on, and they've got a leak, or they've had a data compromise, and they have had some false created data injected into that data compromise, which is going to impact upon the credibility of the government. And the team has had to come up with a set of recommendations and suggestions to take to the government, and what we have something called the Cobra committees, which sit in cabinet office meeting room, cabinet office briefing room A, isn't it? So that's Cobra, so that's the highest priority sort of government briefings that we get. And effectively, the team has to come up and do a briefing to government about what their suggestion is that they should do at this point in time. When Sophie did it, they suggested that basically we should put tanks on the streets of London and mobilise the army. And frankly, I think it's a great plan. At the moment, my team has, although they didn't put it in writing, suggested that perhaps we should bomb one of our neighbouring countries. Was it Serbia? Serbia, yes. Because one of the threats seems to have come out of Serbia, they've suggested that we should nuke Serbia. I'm glad to say I don't think that made it into the final document when it was sent off, although I didn't actually see the document before it was sent off, so I'm not entirely sure. But it is a fantastic thing, because in reality we see these things constantly. We see SCADA problems, we see data breaches, we see fake news being created. I mean, there was a thing in the press very recently about fake audio of Joe Biden making calls in America, or Joe Biden himself wasn't making calls, but they were calls that were purporting to be Joe Biden with faked audio. So that's a very realistic problem. We've seen, fake images left, right, and centre. And again, an article that came out in Forensic Focus recently was about the problems of the sheer volume of data that police forces are trying to process with regards to IIOC. Child imagery, because there's so much fake generated imagery now, actually doing protection work to identify real subjects and real victims is actually becoming a problem in terms of just sheer volume of data. So these are real, very realistic world problems that are being put forward, and we're looking at the next generation of graduate students to come in and find solutions to these problems, and it's really fascinating.
Yeah, I mean, deepfakes themselves, they're coming up everywhere now. It was something I was looking into yesterday on the treadmill, and it's impressive how you can get something so close to reality. And it kind of raises the question of, at what point are they going to become so authentic that we're not going to be able to confidently identify that they are deepfake or not, is the real question now, because technology is only growing and really getting better.
The real issue, I think, for me is that at the moment, technically, we can do it relatively quickly. But it's not technically that matters. It's the when I look at a picture, does it ring true for me or not? And that's what happens on Twitter. X. And that's what happens on Facebook, is those pictures get posted. It's not analysed by a professional that then goes, actually, you know what, this looks a bit dodgy, I don't think it's right. It's instantaneously broadcast to the world, and everybody goes, oh yeah, look. And, you know, even if you turn around and tell them it's fake, it's in their mind already. It's the propaganda game. It's not about... it's not a technological problem. It's a psychological problem. It's a propaganda problem. And,
I mean, Facebook put policies through to ban them back in 2020. So technically, you're not actually meant to post deepfake videos, photos, etc. on Facebook now. But it's even coming up in what did I watch? Netflix. Fool Me Once, the new series out. There was something in there where they. Disclaimer, if anyone's about to watch it, where they mucked around with the cameras.
If you haven't watched it already, I've seen this one, so for a change, I'm not spoiling something I haven't seen. But yeah, there is a nanny cam that's set up in the house in question. We'll give you an opportunity to stop listening at this point in time. But there's a nanny cam set up in the house in question, and it's deep faked with images taken from a wedding video. And somebody who is dead is then seen to be brought back, seen to be alive, and starts to psychologically mess with the protagonist in the film. And it's very well done, and it's plausibly done because actually, if you watch the clips the way they've done them, the movements are the same, so it would have worked. I was watching it with quite a fine-tooth comb and a magnifying glass when I realised that was what they were doing. I was like, "Ooh, go on then." And yeah, it would have. Now, Martino over at Amped would have run that through Amped Authenticate, and he would have gone, "Yeah, no, that's fake," almost instantaneously, because of the fact that there would be a whole bunch of technical aspects that didn't show up. But the reality of what that woman saw for her was real, and she thought she was going to, and that's what we would all have done. We would have all reacted the same way, and ended up getting pepper sprayed in the face. So it was a very thing. There was one a few years back. I can't remember what it was called, but it was about the editing of CCTV footage about a guy who got off a bus or killed somebody on a bus or did something to do with a bus. But yeah, you still see him step out, and it's not him, it's somebody else, and it all gets very, very messy. But even then, I mean, CCTV footage is so poor quality. Professionally, we look at it, it's so poor quality that, a simple edit you can't tell. I mean, you won't have seen, Desi, probably, but we had a terrible attack recently in the UK of a caustic substance being thrown over somebody. And the attacker was also covered in the same substance. And there are some CCTV images that have been put forward of him leaving the scene. And I mean, you can barely make it out. It's terrible. It's absolutely pointless. I mean, you can see that he's been hurt by this, but if you asked me to identify him in a lineup, other than the fact that half his face was missing, I wouldn't be able to tell him from anybody else. It really is such poor quality stuff. So the effort required to turn around something plausible of that level of quality is simple. It's not difficult.
And then it's the fact that the public just don't have access to this software either. So it's not like we can look at something and go, hang on, let me check a second, is it a deepfake? There's not going to be that. It's going to be either you're told on the news that it's not, or you believe that it is until you're told not, if it's that realistic and that true. So, I mean, I'm sure there is software out there that is accessible to use if you really wanted to, but whether people would or not, it's another question. Or whether people even think to, because deepfakes are new. Well, it's not a thing that's been around for ages.
yeah, it is that. Would you think to do it? But also, there's the whole thing of just the idea of the conspiracy theory, um, and it's an amazing thing that you have this concept that is to a normal person, and I'd say this carefully, but to a normal person, completely bleeding ridiculous. There's no way on earth that the world is flat. But as soon as you start to tell someone who believes that, their ideas are tainted by the idea that you are either a stooge of the state who is trying to control their mind, or that you have been fooled by the state into thinking that this is the truth when it really isn't. Counteracting conspiracy belief is an incredibly difficult thing to do. And if you've seen a video with your own eyes that shows something, who are you going to believe? The person who is telling you that what you've seen isn't real, or what you've seen?
Yeah.
Mm.
Exactly that. And it's doubting yourself then as well. And it's psychological play, really, of how much you believe yourself versus realizing that actually what you're seeing in front of your own eyes isn't true. And that's difficult to explain to somebody as well. Like, oh yeah, I know you saw it, but it's not right.
I wonder, this again is like way off digital forensics topic, so maybe I'll get someone on my podcast to talk about this, like a psychologist or something. But are most humans susceptible to conspiracy theories because our parents lied to us about Santa Claus when we're young? Let that sink in. From a young age, we're told to believe in something that we never see. Does that affect our adulthood?
When I was younger, I caught my mum out because she'd written Santa Claus's label in the same writing as she'd written her own label, and I put them next to each other, and I was like, and then I think that's when she
did that begin your career in STEM from there? You're just like analyst.
Yes, that's actually where I began at the age of very young. So
the other question though is that it is, as part of this, is it to blame for that, or is it actually just that there is an innate human need in order to believe in things, in order for us to be able to cope with a world which is what it is, whether it's, I think perhaps there's a sort of deep-seated genetic evolutionary trait in, I don't understand what lightning is, and therefore I'm going to create a god that throws lightning bolts in order to explain it so that I can get on with my day, as opposed to hiding terrified in a cave because I don't know what's going on. So, again, there is perhaps we need to go and find a psychologist and bring them on to have this conversation with us.
It'll be interesting. It would be interesting.
Yeah. Definitely a fascinating. But the psychology of computer use is brilliant anyway, isn't it? When we look at it, everything from user interface design about how you put buttons in the right place so that people can find them. And you will get people who say, and I say this again from having responded to something on Twitter today, people who will tell you that Windows is by far superior to Mac OS, which is by far superior to Linux because the buttons are in the right place. I mean, come on. Down to the whole thing is just Vi versus Emacs versus Nano, all of those arguments. The whole sort of computer belief system and people choosing passwords in certain ways, or it's all. The thing is, at the end of the day, isn't it? Is that we're all human, and what we actually do isn't computer security. It's human security that just happens to bounce around, some electronic objects in the middle. So there you go. There's my philosophy for the day. You can tell it's wrapping up to my bedtime.
I like the philosophy. I love listening to people's thoughts on the stuff like this, like how it works, what itches your brain, like that type of thing.
Yeah, and this is why podcasts work, is because you're not the only one.
Yeah, you find your niche of people.
Yeah, I can imagine.
We will call it a day. Well, we will call it a day, you and I, Sophie. Desi will call it a start to a day and go and get a cup of coffee at last after having a piece of toast or something.
Yeah.
And thank you very much for joining us on this mad ramble of an evening. I've had fun. I don't care whether you enjoyed listening to it or not. I'll be brutally honest. We did plenty of serious stuff. This was just a laugh, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. You can find this podcast, if you do want to listen to it, on any of the good podcast players. Why do we say this at the end? If they're already listening to it, they've heard it. They must have picked it up from somewhere.
So you're the one. You're the one saying this. Let's put that at the front from now on.
Yeah, I mean, Desi, we picked this up from Krista when we started. This was the way she did it. She introduced it and then she closed it, and
yeah,
we've habitually done it since. Anyway, you can find this podcast on any of the good podcast sites: Spotify, Apple Podcasts. We're on YouTube. Subscribe and like, I think, is the things we're supposed to say if we're on YouTube, isn't it?
Yeah. And comment.
Yeah.
I think the new algorithms comment. Comments would be good. And this one's probably a good one to comment on. Do you believe in Santa or not?
The only correct answer is yes.
Yes, of course. Yeah. Yes, this will also be available on the Forensic Focus website, where a transcript will also be available if you wish to search for any particular terms that we may have used. I would say we'll put relevant links in, but I don't think we have any relevant links to put in. I don't think we referenced anything whatsoever, did we?
I think there was a few, and my Discord, if people want to watch you do a car deadlift.
Sorry, no, I take it back. There is the critical link that will be put in this to the Discord channel, and there's his podcast and his sweaty cyber advice, which is worth listening to.
And probably the webinar link for Sophie doing the TryHackMe
webinar
thing.
link for Sophie. Cyber Women Group will put in. Cyber 912 will put in. We'll put in a whole bunch of stuff that's going to drive Zoe around the bend, because we've just started referencing it now, and we'll call it a day. Thank you very much, Sophie, for joining us. It's been an absolute pleasure. I personally will see you in a week or two, yeah, I will be having words with you about the team that you put me with, because they're bonkers. I think that's just the simple thing to say on this front. They're brilliant and they're bonkers. And yeah, we'll talk about that. Desi, always a pleasure. Thank you so much for being up at this stupid time in the morning.
Always.
For you. All right. Take care, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, I. Take care. Thanks, Lily.